Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are back with rounds 2 and 3 of the first annual Dulles Open being held here in the nation's capital. Now, yesterday in the first round, I won with a pretty smooth game, so things are off to a good start, and we're going to pick it up with my first game of the day, the second round in the tournament, where I'm playing against Ismailova Kanin, a player from Azerbaijan. Now, this player, she is relatively young, so when you're playing younger players, you always have to be on alert because younger players have potential to be underrated substantially. All right, so the game starts out with the move e4. I play the Sicilian. Obviously, I want to try and play for the victory, and now she plays the move c3. Now, this is a system that I've actually encountered quite a bit in some of these recent terms that I've played in. This is what is known as the C3 Sicilian or the Alpin. Now, this is an opening that I think is very, very good to play at the amateur level. It's something that's very, very hard to crack, and white usually has very clear-cut plans. So I decide to play knight f6. We get e5, I go knight d5, d4, e6, knight f3, takes, and now I play the move d6. Now I did spend a bit of time here before playing this move. My first instinct was to actually play this move pawn to b6. This is what was played in the FIDE World Cup today by Norbert Abdusattorov in a must-win situation against Jose Martinez Alcantara. Now Norbert would lose that game, but because I did see the game with the round starting late here in America, I was going to play b6, and I thought, you know what? Nah, let's not do that. Let's play more standard with d6. Now, this is a very important point that I want to make, both about this game and the game that I'm going to show later from the third round, where one of the problems that I have is on some level, I simply know too much. What I mean by that is I'm thinking about all these different variations, what my opponents can play, and what is the best way to effectively confuse them versus simply trying to play the best lines. Now, the reason I point this out is that after d6, the line that I actually have looked at from the white side is the move knight to c3 in this position. I've also looked at bishop to d3, for example, but white can play the very standard move bishop c4. And frankly, I simply forgot that this move existed at all. And as soon as this move was played, I already started to groan internally and go, oh, what am I going to do? Because white's plan is so simple here, as we're about to see. So I play bishop e7. We get castles, I castle, and now we get the move queen to e2. The big issue that I have here is white has a very straightforward plan of a move like knight to c3, or bishop d3 and queen e4, or the move rook to d1. With all these simple plans, I have to come up with an idea, and white's development will be unimpeded either way. So I go bishop d7. Get knight c3, I trade, and now I play the move knight to c6. Now this move is surprisingly bad. I was originally going to play the move bishop to c6 here, but I thought that after the move bishop to f4, for example, I didn't really know how it was supposed to be better. There's even takes and knight to e5. And after I play a move like knight d7, takes, for example, white is just much better in this position. g3 is one move. I think even rook d1 is fine. White has the bishop pair, and I really don't know how I'm going to win the game. Now, this is very important to note because if I were playing someone around 2700, my attitude would be completely different, where I'd be okay with a draw and being solid. But because I'm playing someone so much lower, I'm taking as many risks, I'm overthinking everything, and it really does make it difficult to play good chess because a lot of things that I'm thinking about, I know for a fact my opponents are not even thinking about at all. So I decide to play knight c6, and now we get the move bishop to d3, very logical, thematic move. The idea here is to create the double A battery with queen to e4, so just a sample line. Get this double A battery, and now you go queen takes h7, and this is simply checkmate, and black loses the game. So she plays bishop d3. Now, when I played knight c6, I was thinking to myself that in this position, after takes and queen to a5, there is an imbalance here. White has these split pawns on the queen side. I figured against someone so much lower rated, with an imbalance, I should have great chance to win the game eventually, since I'm the stronger player. But the problem in this case is that white's moves are still super easy. So we get queen to e4. I go g6, of course, stopping the checkmate on the diagonal. We get bishop to h6, rook d8, rook b1, rook b8, and now we get the move rook fc1. Now, I'm going to be honest, in this position, I was mortally afraid of the move queen to f4 here, actually, simply giving up the pawn and playing for this bishop to e4. Suddenly, white has a lot of pressure towards the king side. I can play a move like knight to d4, but after white trades and plays something like rook fd1 here, I thought that after queen a4, takes, rook b8, and rook b1, the game would simply end in a draw. So we get rook b1, rook b8, now we get rook c1. When I saw the move rook c1 on the board, I was actually quite happy because now my young opponent is trying to guard the queenside pawn here and neglecting time from the attack on the king side. So I go bishop to e8 here, moving the bishop, opening this file for the rook, and now we get the move bishop c4. Now here I play queen to a4, we get queen to e2, and now I play the move knight a5. Now I actually was feeling really groovy about my position at this point in the game. As you can tell, I'm already up nearly 50 minutes on the clock here. I'm really pressing here, and I thought I was already on the path to a relatively smooth victory. So we got the move bishop to b3. Now, I'll be honest, this is a move that I actually did not expect, simply because I thought after bishop b3, I would trade and go queen g4 and have the two b's. The move that I expected was bishop to d3, and I was going to go queen g4, h3, and queen to h5 here. And I thought after bishop to e3 and bishop c6, suddenly there's all kinds of pressure on these diagonals. The queen, the bishop, and the rook are ideally placed. Now, the reason I mention this line is that in the game after bishop b3, I came extremely close to simply blitzing out this move queen g4. Ultimately, I didn't play it, and the reason that I didn't play it is after queen g4, h3, and queen to h5 here, white has the move queen to e3 guarding the bishop. Now, the reason it doesn't work in the other line, I just realized, I want to point this out, is after queen e3, black can sack the rook, with rook takes bishop, take the bishop, and now you simply have two bishops in return for the rook. But in this position, after queen to e3, there's no bishop on d3 that can be captured, and I was simply going to play bishop c6, but I realized there was this move knight to h2 with the idea of knight to g4, aiming towards the f6 square, guarding the pawn and the bishop, and I actually was really scared about this position. I thought that I might be in serious trouble. Now, computers, of course, laugh at me, and they say after queen to f5 with the idea of rook to d3, black is completely fine, but for whatever reason, I really didn't like this position. I spent a lot of time, and that is why ultimately I ended up playing this move queen to a6. Now, you'll notice here, I have 121, I spend 15 minutes, and I try to get into an endgame. Now, queen takes a6 was played here by my opponent after a nearly 20-minute think. Initially, I was very happy to see this trade because I thought that if white plays a move like queen to e3 with the idea of queen to f4 and all these ideas on the king side, I still think that I would have been in some trouble. But we get queen takes queen, I take, and I figure I have the two b's. I'm up what am I up? I'm up almost 50 minutes on the clock here. I figure I should win the game playing a much lower rated opponent. But we get the move h3. Now I play bishop to c6. This is a move that I would not have played in a normal game, by the way. Normally I would have played the move a5, but I figured here after a move like rook to a1, rook takes b3, rook takes a5, there's simply, I can go rook a3, white plays something like takes, rook a1, bishop c5, and white can even go bishop e3 here. And after takes, I'm in no danger of losing the game, but there's almost no chance that I can win the game. So because of that, in my mind, I have to, again, not play the best move in the position. I have to try to look for practical chances to try to create winning opportunities. So I go over the move bishop c6 right away. We get knight to d2, and now I play the move g5 here. This is a move that I really didn't want to play, but at this point, I figured that white's knight is going to c4. There's rook to a1, and also with time pressure looming for my opponent, g5 is a very spicy move. It temporarily traps the bishop on this king side. If I have all day in the world, for example, and I can get my rook to g8, suddenly after rook g6, the bishop is trapped, and I will win the game. So I go g5, trying to spice up. I want to really put pressure on the clock, change the dynamics of the game, and we get the move knight c4. I go bishop d5, and now we get the move knight d6. Now at this point, you'll notice, of course, that I have 58 minutes, and my opponent has 4 minutes and 22 seconds, and this leads to some mistakes. So I take, I go f6, and now we get the move h4. Now this is a bit of a panic move, I thought, for my opponent. Clearly, she's worried about this bishop getting trapped. Say you play king h2, after king f7, h4, king g6, takes. The bishop is simply trapped here, and black will win the game. So we get h4. I take, and now we get c4, and here I play the move bishop e4. Now it's worth pointing out that the computer actually likes this move king to f7, because after takes, king g6, and the move f4 here, black can simply go bishop to e4, and with this bishop that's kind of trapped here on the king side, the bishop can't get out here, black should be a little bit better. But I decided to blitz this move out. This is a move that I probably should have spent more time on. At this point, 57 minutes, there is zero reason to rush it here, but I was trying very hard to put my opponent under time pressure. So we get c4. I play bishop e4, and now we get this move c5. And even though the computer doesn't like this move, I think this is a phenomenal decision from a practical standpoint, because with my opponent down to 16 seconds, she's got to look for obvious plans. And even though white is sacking the rook, after takes, you have these two connected pass pawns, and this is a very tough position to play. So I go king f7. We get bishop to e3, apparently a blunder here. White should play the move bishop to d2 with the idea, I guess, that after rook d c8, white can play the move rook c1, and I guess after rook c6, White can play, bishop to a5 here, followed by this move b4, I guess. And suddenly with the chain of 3, this bishop guarding and covering this queening square, I guess white is supposed to be fine. Now, this is a line that I didn't see during the game. It's actually a very nice, instructive idea, but it's hard to find. So we got bishop e3. Now, of course, I blitz out e5 right away. At this point, I'm going to be honest, I was simply moving too fast. I figured that that with white having the bishop and the 2 pawns, I did not think I could actually be better here. And so I thought my only chance to win is to move fast. Now, this, of course, is insane with 47 minutes on the clock. I should obviously be using my time and looking for good ideas. But no, I play e5. We get rook to a1. I play king e6, takes, and now I play the move rook to d7. Guarding the pawn on a7, and temporarily these white pawns cannot advance. So we get rook a3. Now I play the move h3, and this move is just a terrible, terrible decision. Putrid move played after about a 1-minute think. And I'm going to be honest, when I played h3 here, I did not see that white could go g3, king h2, and king takes h3, or I never would have played it. Now, if I'd spent 10 minutes, probably I would have seen g3, king h2. But again, I rushed this move, and this is simply a terrible decision. What I should have played here is rook to b5, as my rooks now target both of these pawns. And after white plays a move like king h2, I can go a5. After king to h3, now I can play the move f5 here, threatening to go f4 and winning the bishop or the pawns. And after white plays a move like f3, now when I go rook g7, there's pressure on g2, there's pressure on b3. The pawns are immobilized here, and black is completely winning. But no, I go h3, she plays g3, and suddenly I think to myself, what on earth have you done? You're a complete idiot. Now, not only am I going to lose this pawn, but the pawn on g3 also covers the f4 square if I try to push my p forward. So I go king d5. We get king h2, I play f5, takes, and now I disastrously play this move f4, which is just a ridiculous move by me. In this position, had I played the move rook to b5 again, with the idea of pushing the pawn and spying these pawns on c5 and d6, black is actually winning. Now again, if I had spent 10-15 minutes, probably I'd find this, but for whatever reason in this game, I was just moving too fast. So I go f4, we get takes, and now we get the move bishop e3, I go king d5, we get bishop takes a7, I go rook b7, back, and now I take the pawn. In this position, you're probably thinking, white has a bishop and a pawn for the rook, so I should have chance to win. Now, when I reached this endgame, initially I thought I have great chance to win here, but as I realized, much to my horror, I suddenly realized that with this pawn on the h file, this is actually a theoretical draw. Now, the reason I mentioned that is what could have been played here is this move rook to a7, and after rook to a7, the game would have been a draw for sure. If I take on b3, after rook takes h7, white has a pawn and a bishop for the rook. This is standard draw. And if I trade here, let's say I'm somehow able to win the pawn even. This is simply a theoretical draw. I cannot win this position because once this pawn gets down the board, there's no way to progress. The bishop keeps yo-yoing. If I go forward, the bishop will always just yo-yo on all these squares, and the game will end in a draw. Now, this is important because initially I didn't even realize that this was a draw. So when she played this move rook a5, I go king e6. And when she goes rook a3 back, instead of rook to a7, I immediately play rook d3, check, drop back, and now I go king g7. It's worth noting that when I put the rook on d3, now any idea of rook a7 is out the window because I will take due to the pin. Here we get rook to a6. Probably king g2, king h3 would be the easiest way to play, but again, with my opponent having 13 seconds, she's just going fast. So we get this position, rook h4, I take, I've gotten the maximum here, I now have a rook for a bishop, but again, with this pawn on h7, as you can tell from the valuation, black is not actually winning. So we get rook g4, I just keep going all over the board, keep waiting. She puts the bishop on g3 here now, with the bishop guarded by the pawn, and now I go king g5. We get rook a4, rook d5, check, she goes back, and now I play the move h5. We get king h2, rook d1, and now we get the move check, king e4, and the move rook to a4. Now here rook takes h5 would lose the game, because after check, king g2, there's simply rook to g1, checkmating the white king. So we get rook a4. I go king d3, rook a3, rook a4, rook e1, and now we get the move rook h4. Now this move is actually a losing blunder, and weirdly enough, when my opponent played this, initially I thought this was winning, and then for some reason I played rook to a1 rather than deciding to check. Now the reason this line is winning is because after check, king f3, takes, and rook to g4 here, the white king can never go back to the h file, because if you ever go king g2, I have h4 winning this bishop. And so white is stuck having to play something like bishop h2. I slowly walk my king all the way back to f5, and now I push the pawn forward. I push it forward again. We get bishop g3, and now I drop the rook back. And as you'll notice, this white king can never get back. So eventually what will end up happening here is I will walk this king all the way up the board, down to c2, down to d1, and the king will get in here to g1 with the pawn pushing forward, and I will win the game. So when rook to h4 is played, I go rook to a1 immediately. I don't know why. Again, we get king g2, check, and now I play the move king d3. Now what's weird is as soon as the move rook to f4 is played on the board, suddenly I have this very weird glitch in my mind where it's like I looked away and I was like, what just happened? What did you just do? What? It does not compute. So when she plays rook f4, I realize my mistake, and now I'm just very, very angry, knowing that I'm not going to win the game. But with only 14 seconds, I have to play on. So I go rook b1. We get king h3. Now, of course, she does not put the rook back on h4 when I realize it's winning. I go rook a5, rook f3, king e2, rook e3, and now I go king f1. Now, it's very strange that suddenly my opponent, she lost the thread of the game here. Had she played the move king to h2, for example, or king g2 here, just waiting on the two squares, or, for example, waiting with the rook on these two squares, basically, there's no way for me to ever do anything here, and the game will be a draw. But she goes forward, so I bring my king forward, king f1, and now we get the bizarre blunder king to h4. King to h2 here would draw. f4 apparently is a draw, very hard to play. But after king to h2, we reach the same situation where the king, the bishop, and the rook are just going to wait forever, and there's no way to win. But we get king h4. Now I go king g2, and suddenly out of nowhere, there's a mating net. I'm threatening to play the move rook to h1, which would checkmate the king as it has no square, and suddenly the game is all but over. So we get rook to e5, I throw in the check, king g5, I trade, I take the pawn, and now with the rook guarding the pawn, the rook, and the king marching up the board, the game is over. We get bishop f4, king g2, I push the pawn, and after h3, my young opponent resigns the game because there's no way to stop me from pushing h2, moving the rook. If white doesn't sack, I queen the pawn, and in this position, with a king and a rook versus the king, I'll win this 100% of the time. So a very, very weird game by me. I felt like I simply was lacking motivation. I was moving too fast at all the wrong moments, and really, I think, overthinking things throughout the game. Alas, I was able to get a miracle victory. Lady Luck, it would appear, is smiling on me as I win in the second round. So after this very, very disastrous second game where I barely won, I have to play my next game 30 minutes later with the white pieces against the FIDE master, Matthew Guo Dao. Now, there's another kid that I'm playing against, a young player who has a FIDE rating of 2310, and my goal here is to revert to what I played yesterday, playing the classic old man chess. So I play c4, we get c6, and now I play the move d4 after a long think. Now, already on move number 2, I'm thinking, what am I going to do against the classic Slav defense? So I play d4, d5, knight f3, knight f6, and ultimately I settle upon this line with queen c2. Now, this is a line that I played many, many, many years ago in the U.S. Championship. I believe it was the 2003 United States Chess Championship when I played this line against Alexander Shapunsky with queen c2. Now, to give you guys a thought of my thought process during the game, there are all sorts of different lines. I can play e3 here. I can go knight c3. I can play g3. I can play queen c2. Now, ultimately, I settled on queen c2, and the plan was that after pawn takes pawn, I was going to play e4. But then I decided to play queen takes c4 instead because since my opponent moves so fast, I thought playing this gambit line with e4 like I did against Shapunsky 20 plus years ago would be a little bit dubious. Now, the way this line goes is b5, you play b3, takes, and black has an extra pawn, but you have a big white center. Now, of course, I should have done this. Obviously, I should have done this, but because my opponent's playing relatively fast and taking, I thought, you know what? Nah, let's play the safe old man line with queen takes c4, and now we're going to get the move bishop f5. But lo and behold, we get to move bishop g4. Now, the reason that I mention this is that one thing people might not know is when I played the candidates in 2024 in Toronto, one of the systems I prepared from the black side was the Slav defense. So because I prepared it from the other side for such a serious tournament, I'm thinking about all these machinations of the lines, do this, do that, and I'm just totally overthinking everything. So I go knight bd2, we get e6, I play the move g3, bishop e7, bishop g2, castles, h3, bishop h5, and now I play the move e3. Now, my opponent spent a lot of time here before playing bishop h5, and while he was thinking about this move, I ultimately decided what I was going to do next, and what I did wasn't right. Now, what I should have done here is I should have either played queen b3, queen to b6, and now decided to castle and just played a simple endgame, or I should have gone for the very aggressive line with g4, bishop g6, and the move h4. Now, I actually thought after h4, h5, knight to e5, and bishop h7, this is a little bit much. I'm lacking in development on the queen side. I can't really castle easily to the king side, but the computer thinks that after takes, and knight to e4 with the idea of knight g5, apparently white is actually better. But I decided, you know what, nah, I don't want to be boring with queen b3. This looks a little bit too risky going g4, h4, so let's try to be creative in a different way. So I played this move e3. Now, this move is simply a terrible move. I knew it wasn't a good move, but I couldn't help myself, and I played it anyway. Now, I think one of the big reasons that I played this move ultimately is I was also a little bit tired after a long game, just having a little bit of time to grovel down some food quickly. I didn't really have much energy. So I played e3, we got knight d7, and now I play the move g4, and this is simply a ridiculous decision by me. There is no place for g4 here. What I should do is I should simply castle my king out of the center, and after c5 and b3 trying to go for the classic double fianchetto, it's probably only equal, but I am in no danger of losing. But instead I go g4, bishop g6, and knight to h4, trying to argue that I will get the bishop pair, the two b's again, and I'll be better. Now you're probably noticing a theme. In both of my first two games, I've gotten the two b's, and I've gone on to win. But here it's simply wrong because we get to move e5, which by the way is a very natural, obvious human move. I trade, and now at this point, I'm simply a little bit worse here because I'm really struggling in the center of the board. Now, what I wanted to play initially was knight to f3, but I thought that after takes, let's say queen d4 and something like bishop c5, queen d3, queen e7, with the rooks coming to the middle of the board, I thought I was just worse. So I decided, you know what, let's just take on e5 and make a draw. We get takes, queen c3, knight d3, king e2, and the only line that I looked at when I calculated taking on e5 was simply the move knight takes c1, and after rook takes c1 in this position, let's say black was queen b6, I can simply play knight c4, and with the other rook coming to the center of the board, it's just equal. Maybe white's even a little bit better here, but I thought it's equal, it's going to be a draw, that's life. But once I played king e2, much to my young opponent's credit, he found the move knight c5, and as soon as knight c5 was played, I'm like, uh-oh, I have a Bongcloud king in the center, which might look really cool, but I have the bishop and the rook that are not in the game. If I can't get these two pieces in very, very fast, this king in the center of the board is going to turn out to be very bad. So I go knight b3 here. Now, when I played this move, I spent quite a bit of time here. I was very unhappy with the position that I had. Apparently, after the move queen c4, this is much better. I actually saw queen c4. I thought knight d5, and I was in trouble, but I guess I have rook to d1. Maybe it's not so bad, but this is what I should have done. Instead, I play knight b3, trying to activate my bishop and the rook. We got the move knight to d5, and now I play the move queen to d4. Now, the computer prefers queen c2, but I was very, very afraid of this move knight to b4, and suddenly you'll notice these knights are super, super active here. I thought after queen c4 that b5 was winning. Apparently, I'm stupid. I thought takes, queen d3. Oh, and I'm blind. I can just go king to e1, and apparently I'm winning. The only line I saw was king to f3 and f5, and I thought with this king under attack on the f file, wide open, I'm probably in all kinds of trouble. So I decided to go queen d4 instead. And now we get the move queen to b6, and this move is a big mistake here, played after a 10-minute think by my young opponent. Honestly, even though queen d4 is supposedly a losing blunder, the line that's winning according to computer is very, very strange. Even after the game when I was analyzing with my opponent, neither one of us saw the concept that existed. Now, the correct move here is knight to e6, queen to c4, and this very strange computer move, bishop to h4 with the idea of going queen to f6, attacking the pawn on f2. Now, after bishop to h4, black is simply winning in this position because I have no good way to guard the pawn. Let's just say I play bishop d2, after queen f6, rook to f1, and now the move rook e8 and rook d8 incoming. This Bongcloud king is going to get checkmated in the center of the board. So, when I played queen d4, I had the sense something was wrong, but I couldn't see it. So if you sense but you can't see it, you kind of just keep going with what makes the most sense. And now we got to move queen b6. Now, after knight e6, queen c4, bishop to h4, there is no coming back for me. Literally no coming back, but neither one of us saw it. And as I told my opponent after the game, this is a line that I think he should not really feel bad about missing it because I didn't even see this idea either. So instead we get queen b6. Now I play queen c4 here, and at this point I was breathing a bit of a sigh of relief because now I know I'm going to get bishop d2 and be able to bring the rooks into the game. And I thought, all right, you survived the worst, probably you're not going to lose anymore, you'll make the draw, and it's, that's how it goes. So we got to move rook to d8 here. I actually thought knight d7 made some sense here. My intention was to play queen to a4, and after knight c5, queen c4, just make a draw. Instead, we get rook d8. Now I go bishop d2 with the bishops being developed here. I felt pretty confident that I would not lose this game. We got knight takes knight here. One line I want to point out that I saw during the game is this move knight to f4 here. And after takes, knight takes, and pawn takes, black can once again sack the rook with rook takes bishop. And after takes, if I block with the queen, there's rook to d8, and it's spaghetti-o time. I lose the queen and the game. And after the move king c1, queen takes g2, I saw rook to e1 here. And I thought with the rook on the open file, after queen to h3, queen to f1, both these rooks are active, and I should be okay. So we get knight takes b3. Now after pawn takes, I know that I'm no longer in danger of losing. I'm going to be able to bring the rooks to center. I have the two b's here. And if anything, maybe due to the time situation, I can try to play for more. So we get the move bishop to b4. Now, nothing wrong with this move, but considering the time situation, it's a move I don't like. Probably better would have been to play something like queen to c7 back here, simply trying to keep more pieces on the board. So we get bishop b4. I take, bishop to e4. We get bishop b4, and now I play the move rook to d1 to stop the kebab on the second rank. We get queen to c5, I trade, and now I play the move b4. Now at this point, I figure the game is a draw, but with the rook on this a file here, potentially opening up some diagonals for the wooden shield, combined with black having these pawns stacked on top of each other, I thought maybe I could play for more. So we get takes, I take, we get check, king to e2, and now we get the move bishop b6. Now, I actually thought that the safest way to play this for black was to take on b4, and after rook to a7, play the move rook to b8, guarding the pawn. Black can bring the king over to the center, and with the opposite color bishops here, I really feel like there are no chances to win the game for white. But instead, we get bishop to b6, and now I go b5, takes, and at this point, with black having the double pawns, potential to put the bishop on one of these diagonals, I thought with such little time for my opponent, there might be a way to swindle the game. So we get g5. Now I play the move b4, trying to go after this pawn on b5, and here we get the move rook d7. I play bishop c6, rook c7, takes, rook c2, king f3, rook b2, and now I play this very, very tricky move, rook d1. Now, I think my opponent thought the game was simply already over. It was an easy draw, but after rook takes b4 and rook to d5, suddenly this becomes very tricky because my rook targets the pawn, and if black plays a very natural move f6 here, guarding g5, after bishop d3, let's say king to f8 and rook d7, suddenly with the bishop and the rook so close to the black king, this looks very scary. Now, of course, the computer laughs and says, just go a5, just go a4, don't worry. After check, rook e7, bishop c5, check, bishop f8, rook to a8. You can simply play something like a3 here. And even though the king and the bishop are paralyzed here due to this pin, white doesn't have any way to win the game. Now, I think if this had happened in the game, I still would have had very good chance to maybe win, but it looks really scary from afar. When you combine that with the very little time my opponent has, he plays the move g6, going all the way down to 9 seconds before playing it. And after g6, I take the pawn. And even though this endgame still should be a draw, now everything's going to become very tricky because I have a 4-on-2 on the king side. 4 pawns versus 2. We get the move king g7. This move is a mistake here. a5 is imperative in this position. Black has to start pushing the p, play for the counterplay, try to do something, anything right away to save the game. Now, after rook to d5 and a4 here, for example, if I play bishop c6, very important that black plays rook to c4 here. And with the rook always attacking this bishop, if I ever go to d7, I think a3, or not a3, sorry, because there's rook. Actually, a3 is probably still enough for a draw because you have bishop c5 here. And this endgame, I believe, is a theoretical draw here with the 4 pawns versus the 2. But again, it's very hard to play. Nonetheless, a5 would have been correct, but instead we get the move king g7, and now I play this move bishop to d7 here. We get a5, and now I go rook to e5, trying to activate the rook on the e file. Now, at this point, I knew the game was still a draw, but with my opponent literally living on the 10-second increment, I thought I would probably win. So we get king f6, bad move. I go rook to e8, and at this point now, this pawn is going to get glued on a5. It will not be able to get further up the board, so my chances of winning go up tremendously. So I go rook 8. We get king g7. Now I play h4 here. The pawn and the bishop are tied down. I'm pushing my p on the king side here. And at this point, it's very, very tough to save, even though this is still a theoretical draw. So we get the move rook to d2 being played. After rook to d2, I drop back, rook a2, bishop to e8 here. Now the rook cannot attack the bishop, and I'm trying to bring my rook to the 7th rank here to win this pawn on f7. So we get the move rook d2. Now I play rook a6, we get the move bishop to d8 here, and now I play the move g5. And at this point, with the pawns being fixed on these light squares, the rook being super active here, I just don't think any human would be able to save this game, considering the time situation. We get king f8. I drop back, we get king g7. Now I go rook to a7 here. Bishop has multiple paths to hit this pawn on f7, and now black is simply losing. We get rook to b2, I go bishop to e8, and now I'm winning this pawn on f7, probably the pawn on g6, and the game is all but over. We get king f8, takes, bishop b6, rook d7, a4, I take, a3, I check. If black were to play king to e8 here, I have rook a7, creating the classic fossil. I discover the king, king moves, I take the pawn, and with 4 extra juicers on the king side, the game is over. So we get king g8. Now I go rook to b7 here, and we get to move king f8. If a2 were played, I have bishop f7, checking the king. King moves, I take the juicer. Now when black takes a bishop, I take, and again, I have 4 extra pawns, and I win the game very easily. So we get king to f8. Now I play the move bishop to e4. We get a2, I check, king g7, rook to a8. The pawn can no longer go further up the board. Now I can just push the pawns. We get bishop c5, I play h5, and here my opponent resigns the game because the 2 pawns, the p on the g and the h file, is just rushing up the board, and black has no way to stop it. After bishop d6, I just keep checking, push the pawn, even h7 here would be good enough, but basically the pawns cannot be stopped in this position, so therefore my opponent resigns the game. Now, I get a win in this third game, but frankly, both the games today were abysmal. These were terrible games. What I would say is I think in the first game, I was overthinking. I wasn't using my time. In the second game, what happened was I tried to be a little bit too creative. I overthought the opening completely. In the end, I get the win, but both these games were not my finest moments for sure. Nonetheless, I avoid disaster. I win both the games, and now after having played 3 games in the tournament, I am in the lead. Tomorrow, I will be playing one of the strongest players in the event, the Sri Lankan international master, Silva, who I've played many times online, so that should be a great matchup. At any rate, I avoid disaster. Now with only 2 games remaining from qualifying for the candidates, everything is looking good. I would say mathematically, it's actually now impossible for me not to qualify for the candidates, assuming I do play the 2 games tomorrow, or 2 games before the end of the year. So all's well that ends well. I do get the wins. Not happy with the quality of the play, but luckily, no harm, no foul. So on that note, I should say, it's quite late here. It's 11:30 now in the evening. The game tomorrow is starting at 10 a.m. So I'm going to sign off for right now. I hope you guys have enjoyed this recap from day number 2 of the first annual Dulles Chess Open being held here in the nation's capital. If you are not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and we'll be back with a recap tomorrow after my final 2 games in the tournament and my qualification to the candidates tournament. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Have a great rest of your evening, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.